Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to associate myself with the remarks the chairman made about the tragedy in Baltimore and the families who lost loved ones there. But I think we need to have an honest discussion here about the Emergency Relief Fund. Going into this, there was a significant backlog, and recognizing that disasters like this can and do happen, but the severity, the number and severity of natural disasters as well wearing on our resources is significant. So we need to have this discussion because there's not enough in that fund, and we can argue, oh, we want to cut spending. Well, if disasters happen, they disproportionately impact one area that simply can't handle this, but they do impact the country. So if you could give us, Secretary, a deeper understanding of the status of the Emergency Relief Fund, how you envision a supplemental at least addressing this Baltimore disaster, but perhaps also the fact that we have a backlog and that we need to recognize that that spigot, that fund, has to be larger every year. Just to be honest with ourselves, that it needs more money.
Thank you for the question and for your attention to the emergency relief program, which we know is so important anytime there is an incident affecting transportation like the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. For perspective in terms of the proportions that are in play, in May of 2023, FHWA provided $749 million in ER program funds to help 39 states, District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico make repairs for roads and bridges that had been damaged by storms, floods, wildfires, and other events. In January 2024, Federal Highways provided $729 million in ER program funds to help 34 states, as well as D.C., the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. The last update I got showed $950 million available in that fund, but we're tracking approximately $2 billion of unmet need, and that is not including the projected cost of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Now, to be clear, that does not necessarily mean that we would have $2 billion of requests ready to go looking for reimbursement in a single year.
What is that $2 billion?
So that's effectively a pipeline that will then be reimbursed as the states are ready and do their spending. We've had some cases where, just because of the length of time it takes to do reconstruction, checks may be going out 5 or even more years after the original incident, just through the flow of the project. But what we do see is there is a mismatch between the $950 million and the $2 billion plus and counting that we see by way of need. And so we would welcome support on ways to make sure that that fund is adequately topped up, knowing that severe weather is becoming more severe and more frequent, not less, and that even though we are separately working through programs like Protect to make our infrastructure more resilient in the first place against the kinds of threats that weather, natural disasters, and other effects can cause, we still are facing an uphill struggle and are going to need to do everything we can to be ready on the back end to respond when disaster strikes.
So if we equate this, as we often do with a household, it's like operating without insurance in a sense, and disasters do happen. What is the probable need for supplemental? And if we're going to go to that expense, what would it take to fill that fund with a reasonable amount of money, an endowment in a sense, to not have to have a wait for a supplemental when the next disaster takes place?
Well, I'd certainly concur that it would be optimal to know that the fund is being refreshed at a rate that keeps up with the needs that have come to it. Again, if we're using recent years as an index, we would see the last 2 years disbursements would have been between 700 and 800 million, but we know there is even more, and you would want, given the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and you would want some kind of cushion there. So while we have not proposed a specific supplemental at this time, that gives you a sense of the proportion that we think would be needed in order to make sure the ER fund was at a healthy level, and of course would also spare us needing to go to supplementals in the future if we knew that there were adequate balances for the unmet need that was coming in.
No, again, and those details are matter. So again, if making sure the committee knows for the future, what would it take to get the fund at a healthy level to address the needs as they hit, and what would be a normal, appropriate amount to fund that spigot every year? Thank you.
Thank you. So, sorry. Being authorized at $100 million a year and then periodically being supplemented by Congress, we can work with that. But a cushion that's more in the line of the levels that we've found ourselves dispersing in recent years would help us to stay ahead of that and reduce the need for supplementals or additional work outside of the regular budget cycle.
Sheriff Rutherford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary. Great to see you again. And thank you for being here this morning. One of the things that I want to bring up is this issue of vehicle technology and cybersecurity. You know, these new